Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to facilitate this session on funding organizational development for and with you. My name is Claudia Genier. I'm a consultant and philanthropy advisor, and most of you know me as former deputy directors of Swiss foundations at the time of Beate Eckhardt, who is also sitting here with us. So, the topic today is a result of lively discussions among 5 foundations, 5 funders, who wanted to exchange why and how organizational development for a partner was useful, how to do it, and I've been talking about it for months. And so the 5 funders are Mava Foundation, Laudes Foundation, formerly known as C&R Foundation, PeaceNexus Foundation, Oak Foundation, and Mercator Switzerland Foundation. So, the aim of this session is really to discuss and get the insights of the 5 funders, or the representatives of the 5 funders, of whom 3 are with us here today. 2 couldn't make it, 1 because of travel restrictions, and 1 because of a sickness that just occurred recently this week. So, before I introduce our panelists and ask you to come and join me here, I would just like to get a little bit the pulse of whom we have in the room. So if I may ask in the audience, who is representing a grant-making foundation? Okay, thank you. Who is representing a more operational foundation? Okay, welcome as well. Who is an intermediary? Welcome. A researcher, yes, a researcher doing this several times. Thank you, Georg. And who has another background that I've not mentioned? Okay, welcome. And now, regarding organizational development, who has already conducted organizational development internally in its own organization, his or her own organization? Yes. And thank you. And who has funded it for partners? Okay, we've got a few as well. Wonderful. So we expect a lively discussion with you, because this is a discussion session, basically. So as soon as we've started, we can then go into discussing. So let me please now introduce the speakers, and please come and join me. Adriana Craciun from Oak Foundation. I'll introduce you right away. Carole Frampton de Tscharner from PeaceNexus, and Simon Mériaux from Mava Foundation. Please come and join me. Wonderful. So, Adriana Craciun, as I said, is Senior Advisor for Organizational Development and Capacity Building at Oak Foundation. Welcome, Adriana. You have 20 years of experience of working in the non-profit sector and capacity development field. And what I would like to point out is that she has a master's degree in bridge engineering. And I think this is really crucial when you want to build bridges between program, OD people, with partners, with the board. So welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Then our second panelist is Carole Frampton de Tscharner. Welcome as well. She is Organizational Lead and International Partnership Manager at PeaceNexus Foundation. PeaceNexus is a Swiss-based independent foundation that aims to strengthen peace-building efforts towards more peaceful and inclusive societies.
Thank you.
Welcome. And maybe I also mentioned that you started your career as a mediator, trainer in several African countries. And then our third panelist for today is Simon Mériaux from Mava Foundation. Simon, you're Organizational Development Manager. Yeah. You have a mixed background in ecology and social sciences, and you joined Mava when Mava and FIBA merged in 2014. Yeah. Welcome as well.
Thank you.
Mava is active, most of you know Mava, but Mava is active in conservation, and what is special is that they will be sunsetting the foundation's activities in 2022. Yeah. And this has implication, obviously, for funding organizational development. Now, I would also like to mention the 2 persons who couldn't make it, but who were also active in the paper that you just received and that we've been working on earlier this year. So we have Fabio Almeida. He is based in Amsterdam and couldn't make it because of travel restrictions. He is part of this standing group, and he leads the Laudes Foundation's organizational effectiveness strategy. Now, not on the panel, but joining us a bit later is Thierry Renaud, also from Fondation Mava. Thierry, you are Director Impact and Sustainability, and you were also part of this group from the very beginning. Welcome as well. So I think...
and Andrew? And Andrew?
Andrew. Yes, Andrew. Sorry, I forgot Andrew. So Andrew is the second person who is absent today. So Andrew Holland is Director Mériaux Foundation Switzerland. He was supposed to be with us on the panel, but he's got kids, and as we know, kids can become sick at school or in school camps, and so he got sick as well. And he thought it's better not to test whether that's COVID or not COVID, so he's not with us today. He's also been involved in this group and working on the paper that you have in front of you. I will just say a few words about that paper. We will not go through it all during the session today, but we would like to provide additional insight on each of the 3 foundations that are represented today, and also basically give you the curiosity to read the paper later on. And it's really meant as a discussion basis so that you can then start conversations with each of the foundations. Yeah, exactly. So I would say that we should just now jump in and start with a story for each of the foundations that's represented here. And for that, I would like to give you the word, Adriana.
Thank you, Claudia. And the story that I would like to showcase today, it's a story of an organization called El Futuro. They are based in North Carolina, USA, and they are funded by the Oak Foundation since 2015. They received a core support grant 2015 until 2019 for 4 years, and last year they were just renewed for another 4 years for another core support grant. This organization is providing mental health services to the Latino population in North Carolina, which is just over 1 million strong, so it's a quite high number. This population is affected by a lot of trauma because of migration and because of violence they experience through the migration process, but also as they arrive in the United States. Most of them are undocumented. So this organization, El Futuro, is providing really vital services for this community. So they have an inpatient clinic where people can come and receive mental health support, but also their health professionals are also going into the community to help people. They provide these health services in Spanish, which is vital because a lot of the target population doesn't actually speak English. So, as I said, we support them for quite a while because of the services they are providing. They also and the number of people who are coming to require their services, they had to grow quite fast as an organization. And our core support allowed them to hire bigger staff and to basically expand those services. And of course, this growth came with normal growth pains, let's say. And on top of the core support that we provided, we decided to offer them some capacity building organizational development support. We have an organization in North Carolina we have partnered with, Triangle Community Foundation, through which we deliver these capacity building grants, which El Futuro took advantage of. So they got a very small grant to do an organizational assessment, identify challenges, and then they got another bit of support to implement this capacity building. So this capacity building project. So I think it's best if we hear from them how they use this and how they actually benefited. And we have a very small video which will present what they have done with this money.
Exactly.
Yeah?
So
So we received funding to first do an organizational assessment, which was really helpful. It sort of helped us take stock of where we had come as an organization and kind of where we are and where we're heading, and look at some of the areas where we probably could improve our capacity to help us be more effective in serving the community we serve and reaching our strategic goals. And out of that, what we really ended up focusing on was our communications program. We were founded as a volunteer-led organization that was very grassroots and kind of gritty, and everybody pitched in and made things happen. But we had reached a point where we were, I think at that point, probably 13 or 14 years old, and looking to reach a broader audience with our services, especially as we were growing training and sort of sharing best practices with other providers around the state. And so we really wanted to improve our branding and kind of refresh it in a little bit to be more connected with the community we serve, and also this broader kind of outward focused approach of the organization. And so we went through an entire process with a local firm to kind of look at what our values are as an organization, the community we serve, the community we're situated in, the audiences we hope to be looking out to. And they developed probably, I want to say 18 or 20 different logo types for us that we were able to offer feedback on and tweak and hone in until ultimately we had a new logo, a new brand identity, and a refreshed website that have felt like they're more in line with the directions we're heading right now. I think one of the things that we really came to see as a foundation of the work that we were doing was the importance of having core support from the Oak Foundation at the same time that we received the capacity building funding, and even a little bit before that. So, you know, I think as a very grassroots type organization and working in a field where there is a lot of need in the community, it's hard to think about taking time away from those direct services and trying to help meet that need to do things like work on branding and a new logo and a new website. But sort of having that core support for our core services along the way and in a multi-year grant really helped us have the confidence we needed to say, okay, we know that those services are going to continue, and we can even do more of those services by bringing in a professional development person, by expanding our space and doing some things like that. And once we knew that that felt really steady and we could be confident in that, then it was much easier to think about doing things like an organizational assessment and communications work and things like that.
At the beginning, it was decided to invest not only on conservation projects, but also on people and on organizations. And over the time, Mava has built long-standing and strong relationships, partnerships with organizations working on the field. A few years ago, it was reaffirmed or reconfirmed the closure of Mava Foundation, the end of its funding activities at the end of 2022, in about 2 years. For a lot of people who had a pretty easy access to Mava funding, of course, it was not good news. But at the same time, for a lot of people, it was also an opportunity to engage with us in an OD partnership for them to improve their capacities, their fundraising, management, communication, governance capacities, and to become stronger before we leave in 2022 and enjoying and benefiting from this OD support from Mava until 2022. So I would say that having a strong and a clear deadline could be a real opportunity, could make really a push for these partners who understand their need and who decide to invest time and to invest people to become stronger and to be able to go on pursuing their activities and mission after they will have lost one of their main funders. For example, I could speak about one of our key partners, which is a Swiss-based organization working on sea turtles conservation in Cape Verde, in Cabo Verde. They decided to engage with us in an OD process, in an OD partnerships, and they wanted to focus these partnerships on fundraising. I just want to stress that OD is a long, very long process, and for them, it was the issue was to hire a new position in the team, to reorganize the team, to build new partnerships, to develop or review their business model and fundraising strategy, etc., etc. And they are still working on it. And as you know, you need time, a lot of time, before to be able to get hard cash money in your bank account. Often more than 2 years or 3 years. So it's a very long process. OD is a long process when things are going well, and it's very long process, a longer process, much more longer process when you have to deal with unexpected situations like COVID. And for this NGO working in Cape Verde, they were used to working with international volunteers who came in Cape Verde for the patrolling and the monitoring of the sea turtles, but with the lockdown, they had to completely reshape their way of working and also their way of generating incomes. They did it, they are still struggling with it, but just to say, OD is not an easy journey, a safe journey, it's a long process. And for us, specifically at Mava, having a clear deadline could really make a push, but of course we have to deal with very short timelines.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How many years prior to sunsetting did Mava decide, to start boosting their organizational development? And would you have done it anyway, or was the sunsetting really also a push for Mava to do it more?
Mava have been working on OD from the beginning, mm-hmm. but when we confirmed this ending date, it was 6 years ago, in 4 years ago, in 2016. And of course, it was clear that we had to reinvest more and we had to make more OD to address the specific issue for these partners who are, I would say, pretty too much financially dependent from Mava's funding, and this funding will end in 2022. So for them, it's really an issue, mm-hmm. and that's the reason why we decided to make more OD with them.
Okay, thank you. So we go now over to our third story for today with PeaceNexus and Carole, please.
Great. So we're quite different in that we don't provide organizational development as a complement to programmatic funding. It's our main intervention and theory of change. But let me tell you about one particular story of the United Network of Young Peace Builders. And it's a network of youth-led peace-building organizations. It's been going on for 50 years. And it's been instrumental in pushing through the UN Security Council resolution on the participation of youth in peace and security, which some of you may be familiar with. And once that resolution, a really important resolution in our field, was passed through, they realized they needed a new role. They needed now to help implementing that resolution on the ground with their members. But the effort of pushing, advocacy and the lobbying, the intense lobbying that had been required to pass through that resolution had made them neglect their membership. So they were finding themselves in a situation where they were actually disconnected from the very organization they were representing. And that's how they applied for, because we have a call for proposal, and they applied and were selected. And in our first phase, we do a consultation where we speak to, obviously, in this case, it was the very small secretariat, board members, but also members, partners. And then it culminates in a participatory workshop over 2 days where we really put it all on the table and prioritize what are the main changes that we want out of this funding and this process. What could be different? How can we agree, not just on what is wrong, but what a different organization we will be working towards. And often in these workshops, that's where the skeletons come out of the closet. In this case, it really just confirmed the sentiment of this disconnect with the membership. And so, as a first step, we helped them to have a consultation process with all their members that kind of reestablished a direct dialogue. And out of this consultation, there was a new structure with members rotating in the role of regional coordinators in each of their regions. And in the launch of this new regional structure, that was also an opportunity for members to get involved, to meet each other, to have a new visibility with donors, and that resulted in joint proposal and new synergies that hadn't been possible before. And then that new structure brought up some confusion between the board and the steering committee and these regional advisors. So we did these regional coordinators. So we had also a kind of clarifying process around governance. And then some support with a communication and fundraising consultant. And what was particularly interesting was that until then, they kind of saw themselves as the youth peace movement. And from this quite intense process with these two consultants, they realized we're not the peace movement. We are the bridge between the peace movement and the donor or policy community. And we kind of a professional association for that peace movement. And 3 weeks after that workshop where we kind of came to that place, they pitched that to SIDA, the Swedish aid agency, and they got 3 years of core funding. So they convinced them, they kind of found their very specific value add. And now the organization, which used to be literally 3.5 people living off tiny event-related projects, now have partners kind of knocking on their door, long-term funding, and themselves are providing organizational development to their own members, and really have taken this role of spokesperson for the youth movement. In preparation of that big jump in terms of their budget, we also provided them with leadership coaching, just so that, and they had 6 months in a way to kind of ramp up the whole organization to play this role. So it's been quite a comprehensive process. It's closed now as a sort of specific change process, but we stay very much in touch and engage them with peer learning and other activities.
Thank you. So what you tell us is that not only single organizations can get an OD support in the process, but also networks. Does OD function differently when you try to improve networks or to help them improve networks rather than a single organization?
So networks are always very attractive because they themselves then, I mean, if organizational development is meant to multiply the impact of the organization, when you are developing a network, the multiplying effect is even more potentially bigger, but it comes with bigger challenges. And you really have to look at the individual network. Obviously, it's already quite different if it's a network of individual activists versus a network of organization. You have to really look at, does the network have an established secretariat? Even if it's very small, that there is already some kind of capacity that you can engage with. Because a network will always be something that members invest in kind of as a side activity, and they will naturally give priority to their own survival and needs. And then ideally also have some kind of independent source of funding for that network, whether it's membership fees, and we look at that also as a symbolic sign that members really see value in the network, even if those membership fees are not sufficient as a source of funding. But ideally also, in addition to membership fees, that the Secretariat is providing a service that is essential to the members and is not competing with the members, because that's the problem with networks, is that you can end up competing with your own members. So there's a few more, I would say, conditions for success, and usually they're even more challenging change processes, but with, like we've just seen, potentially really huge benefits.
Okay, thank you. So now I've planned for 4 rounds of questions. One is around starting OD, why and how within a foundation. One is around what's the typical setup. One is around challenges and highlights. And the last one is about more the learning community. But knowing that this is meant to be a discussion session, I propose to give you first the floor. If someone would like to ask a question or react to what's been said so far, I mean, I'm very flexible and we can also adjust our program. And yes, I guess we need a microphone. And don't worry if you don't have a question now, we have plenty. Mara. And please say your name and the organization you're representing and ask your question.
Mara De Monte, I'm a philanthropy advisor. Thank you all for the introduction. I have a very generic question, and maybe you, Claudia, will actually touch upon it later on. But I was just curious if the current situation, like COVID crisis, etc., if you see an increase in the number of requests or the attention given to organizational development, meaning some organizations maybe now do realize they need to take the time and space to actually rethink what they stand for. Others maybe simply have their activities on hold because they cannot do what they normally do. They might want to take the time actually to further develop. So I'm just curious if any of you has something to share. Thank you.
Carole?
So I can speak to that because we've just literally last week selected our new round of partners. So there were a lot of discussion internally. I mean, first of all, our existing partners, we adjusted and sometimes invested a little bit more to help them adapt to the COVID context. So that was the first step. But then we had to make a call for proposal, and we're like, okay, what is the right timing when they're out of kind of panic mode and can actually engage in the more sort of medium-term strategic thinking that such a process requires. We're not firefighters. Our own funding is very limited. I mean, we get 20,000, 35,000. We only cover the cost of the change process, the consultants, the meeting, the strategic retreat. So that does, and we don't allow for salary or core cost to be part of the grant. So we needed to find the right timing for it, and so we then published it. We pushed it back a little bit, published it in July. We had a strong response, and I would say particularly high quality. You could see that people had put a lot of thinking into the proposal. The difficulty for us was to identify organizations that have, from what we know from due diligence, the necessary resilience to survive. I mean, we know already, and the Alliance for Peace Building has done already some reporting on this. Peace building in particular is going to be extremely hit next year financially. It's because prevention is, it all goes to humanitarian emergency responses, understandably so. Some peace builders actually are adapting and entering that space, but there will be less funding. So we needed to identify organizations that we knew could survive, and that already now we're starting to explore had shown some adaptation capacity, and were coming to us not with a panic, how do we pay our salaries, but rather with a vision of a sort of newfound mission, or a sort of context adapted organization. And actually, you could distinguish that quite well from I mean, we don't have a very detailed proposal, but just the way they presented the challenges, and then in the interviews. And again, we talked about courage earlier before lunch. You want to stand by courageous visionary leadership at the end of the day. Yeah.
Any additional contribution to what was just said
so
on the COVID
I cannot
situation?
say that we have seen an increase in demand. We also don't work by demand. We invite applications, but we, as a foundation, we were quite proactive. So we already put additional funding into the sectors we are working. So the trustees decided to put, I think, extra $9 million just within the first few months of the pandemic. We invited all the grantees to let us know if they want to do budget reallocations and delay the implementation of the grants, and really just to allow them flexibility to deal with any emergency, whether it was programmatic or institutional. We also put together quite quickly a capacity building guide for organizations to deal with working remotely and dealing with all the challenges which the lockdown has posed to organizations, leading teams remotely and so on and so forth. So I cannot say that we have seen an increase like Carole was saying, but the prediction is the same, that actually the effects are not to be seen now, because there was this influx of money. A lot of the donors have reacted by putting more money into the sector, which helped the organizations to ride this wave quite easily this year. But in fact, the prediction is that things will get bad next year. So we already started thinking about what should we actually prepare for, because also the type of organizational development support or capacity building will be possibly different. Not only, getting more money, but doing that digitally, online, more than door to door or whatever. And then also in terms of closures, helping organizations to close down or to merge. We also predict that there will be quite a few of those cases. So, but at the moment, I cannot see that we had much bigger demand for organizational development services.
Okay.
For Mava, I would say that COVID has opened new room for discussion with the partners, and we are more talking about OD from another side and from the resilience side, rather than only impact side. So I think a lot of CEOs of our partners just dramatically understood the need to work more on resilience of their organizations and not only on the impact on the field, and they just discover a new field to explore. And especially discussing about fundraising, how to do or how to invent new ways of fundraising now with less public and private money and funding in the world, and with less weight for conservation as a priority, because health is on the top of the priority for all the world. So yeah, it shifts a lot the way of working and the things we have to discuss through OD partnerships.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Question from Beate Eckert.
My name is Beate Eckert. I'm the former colleague of Claudia. I have a question. What is the added value for the organization if you offer them OD support instead of, or asking other way around, instead of selecting organizations you fully trust and just give them unrestricted money and trusting them that they use it in the best way they need it at the moment?
Mm-hmm. I can
one for you, Adriana.
I can attempt to answer that. We as a foundation, question that a lot. Should we just, give the money? And indeed, with some of the programs, within some of the programs and with some of the grantees, we just do that. So it's just unrestricted core support, and I think our core support is at the level of about 36% of the total grant making. And indeed, a lot of the organizations will just take that and run with it, use it also not only for programmatic, but also for institutional development. The counter argument, let's say, is when they put all the money just in implementing programs and they don't pay attention to their own institutional development. And this is where we feel that we have to do what we call core plus to add a capacity building or an organizational development component to that core grant, like it happened with El Futuro. So they had the core support, they used that to grow, but we felt that we still needed to give that extra impetus to sort of get them to look at those internal challenges closer and in a more systematic way, let's say. Most of the organizations we are funding, they are activists, very passionate, very dedicated, and they want to put everything they have into the, helping their constituencies and the communities they are working with. They end up not even paying enough salaries to themselves because they feel guilty, and they feel that every penny they get from the donor has to be put into the community they are serving. So that's why I think it's for their own good in some way that we are trying to encourage through the targeted OD funding we are doing that they pay attention to the institutional challenges, which, in most of the cases appear. So I'm not sure whether you are satisfied with this answer, but this is how we see it from where we stand. I don't know. In your case, you don't do core support.
We don't do core support, but what we find is that where it works the best is when you have within the organization a sort of change champion that actually uses us well, that uses the fact that there is an external accountability to leverage and to engage with what, there's usually a lot of resistance. When you're talking about a change process, you have inevitably some difficult decisions are going to have to be made. There's some reallocation of resources, of power, redefinition of roles, or even of the mission, the core identity of the organization. They will always meet with some resistance internally. And so we find that with our processes that work the best is when there is someone who knows how to use us and who knows how to sort of sometimes protect themselves behind us, behind the fact that, we have this workshop with PeaceNexus, we have received this money to do this. It protects that budget from other priorities and other needs. And so again, the driving force internally is what will make a real difference. And we become the allies in making that happen and navigating that terrain. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that could also be a two-step process, with the first step working on OD to build the trust, the confidence, to open the space to address sensitive internal issues with the partner, and then if things are going well, you can decide to provide them with core support.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think we have 2 more questions at least. Please.
Hello. Yes, thank you. My name is Carlos Ortega. I'm working for the Swiss Red Cross. in Bern, and we have a lot of projects in OD and capacity building. It's very important to work with our national societies, but we have a lot of problems to find foundations or other organizations that fund those projects. So how can we convince foundations or other organizations to fund our OD or capacity building projects?
Well, we're trying to help you here. I mean, that's why also we got together, is that to learn from one another, but also to try to give more visibility to the importance of this work as a really smart strategy, because as was highlighted in the paper, there's a risk in not investing. And with donors kind of saying we just want to fund program and project, and we want to show how all of our money is directly on the ground to beneficiary, that is actually a bit of short-sighted way of thinking. And so with this paper, we really wanted to challenge some of that thinking and have engage other foundations in that approach.
I think the biggest challenge is when you get that question. So, what did OD achieve, or what the capacity building achieve? And that's where you say, okay, I'm ready to invest, but will it lead to anything? And of course, measuring capacity building, as people working in the field know, is it's quite difficult, because you see an improvement like we could see with El Futuro. Can you actually attribute it to Oaks funding? Can you attribute it to the capacity building funding? Do you attribute it to the core support funding or to the other donors they have, or to the fact that actually the organization was in the right place at the right time to actually get that kind of support and ready to engage in that process? They had the right level of maturity and the internal drive to actually do it. But unfortunately, a lot of the funders also look at return on investment, and that's difficult. So obviously, you can't put, like Simon, you were talking about the fundraising. You don't see results. You may disengage from a relationship, and then you will find out, 5 years in the future that organization is doing amazing now, and you think, I hope it was also thanks to the work we've done together. So, but you never know.
But I mean, even with our own board, who is very committed to our theory of change, we found that we had to learn how to communicate better, and did a whole storytelling workshop, because we realized, and I don't know if the metaphor will speak to you as much as it spoke to us, but we're thinking of the swan that takes flight, and we would be really excited about, this organization has come up with a new strategy or a whole new monitoring, evaluation, and learning framework. But we would actually be zooming in on the legs of the swan as it takes off, but we would never talk about how the swan then soars and does a beautiful flight. And so the coach said to us, stop focusing on just these legs that help the swan take off, focus on the swan story. And so now we do more of a before and after. We obviously talk about the specific interventions that were funded, but we also look at, what has this organization done over the last 1-2 years since we started working with them? And we can't exactly attribute how much of it was due to the intervention we supported and the work we did together. But we know that when we came in, they were on the verge of burnout, and they were not capable of what they're doing right now. And as a story, that is actually quite powerful.
And I am pretty convinced that COVID is also an opportunity to prove that the organizations who has already dedicate time and money and staff to take care about themselves, and who were able to have risk reserve, more resilience capacity, will survive, and the other one maybe not. So maybe we will have more concrete and obvious results due to the COVID situation in a few, maybe it's too early right now, but maybe in a few months we will see.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we had one question here and then one question next to you.
Yes, this is Denise Brandgaard from the Novo Nordisk Hemophilia Foundation. I have a question regarding, do you have experience working with organizations that rely purely on volunteers, meaning that they don't have paid staff? And if you do, then what is the difference maybe that you see in the challenges and opportunities of doing OD with these type of organizations?
You want to take that?
I mean, it's obviously when an organization solely rely on goodwill, again, a change process requires additional investment of time. So it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to demand from people who are already volunteering a lot of their time to an organization or network that in addition to that, they will engage with you in a highly participatory and time-consuming process. At the same time, those volunteers are often so committed. They're the ones who see what whatever blockages the organization is experiencing. It impacts them directly, and so often they may drive it even more. But obviously, if you have, like I said, especially with a network, if you have even a small but a few core staff, and I would say the idea, but it's true also with paid staff, because we all know that in NGOs you tend to have an issue of constantly overstretched, overburdened staff. So even if they do get a salary, for them to make some space and understanding that, okay, this may not feel as urgent, but it is actually more important. And that's why for us it's important that they've seen, we talk about the sufficient level of pain as well, that they're in sufficient pain that they're actually gonna say, no, I'm gonna do this. It's a little bit like therapy or getting a coach to get you to meet some well-being goals. If you have to really be faced with what's not working right now, and then have enough energy that you can work towards a different future. So it's also not so much pain or such a dire financial situation that all they can do is survival. So it's this window of opportunity for change. And you also need the change champions you had mentioned earlier on, right? You need them among the volunteers as well. Absolutely, yeah. Anybody else on volunteering?
Yeah, just to say that a part of the team is the board members of the organization, and usually they are not paid. So, and it's very, very important to engage them and to involve them in the OD process. The idea is not only to work with the CEO, is to work with the CEO, of course, but the other staff members, and on the top of that, the board members. It's very important, yeah.
We had one more question, yes?
Elena Torresani from Hear the World Foundation. One of you has briefly talked about impact before, so I was wondering if anyone could share an example how you measure your impact of the capacity building efforts, or how you, in the end of the day, can say that an investment in OD has been successful.
Painful subject, but I'll take it. I'll go. Please. So we are trying since a few years now to try to show what is the impact of this intervention. Like any project, when we fund a capacity building project, there are steps and activities and outcomes, and is that immediate impact that is not an impact but an outcome that you can measure. You have a fundraising strategy, but will that actually lead to more funding, or will it lead to more partnerships and so on and so forth? We developed the theory of change recently, where we try to look at impact at different levels, how capacity building is helping individuals, organizations, networks, and also the field, and try to define those those outcomes which are basically desired by us. But we, as a foundation, invest in capacity building because we are trying to help the partners, the grantees, to perform better in their programmatic work. So at the end of the day, those organizational outcomes are, not as important as how these are leading to the organization actually performing better, supporting the community or advocacy or campaigning, whatever their mission is. So I'm trying to say that we don't really have the formula, but the way we approach this is more from a learning perspective as a donor, and trying to see by looking at these outcomes and short-term impacts, we are trying to see, what can we learn as a donor which would help us to support these grantees in a better way. Is this the best way to do it? Should we do more core support? Should we, I don't know, build the OD field in the geographies where they are operating a little bit better? Because sometimes the lack of infrastructure is actually a big impediment in them doing capacity building. Or so really those questions which are helping us to be better at what we are doing as supporters of organizational development. But we don't have, as a foundation, I can't say that we have the perfect way of measuring impact.
Yes, please, Carole.
So we having to deliver much more sort of results now from our board, much more pressure for that. But already as a kind of good practice, we now ask at the beginning of each process, really, what does success look like? Generally, again, what else is possible for this organization? What is the different future that you want to work towards? But then really break it down into the different elements, if it's a new strategy, and then human resources, systems and policies that will be adapted, etc., to really have them describe these change objectives in extremely concrete terms, not just in terms of the new documents or processes you want to put in place, but what is the kind of organizational culture that you want. So you don't just want an M&E system, you want a system where colleagues kind of share information and reflect on their work on a regular basis. And so when you describe success concretely, then each time we reconnect with partners, we can look at, okay, well, this is our end result. How much progress are we making? And even find some indicators of this progress, which can be very sort of light ones, but about okay, how many issues get pushed from one meeting to the next unresolved because you are not able to make decisions effectively in the organization. Mm-hmm. So you can find little indicators that are where the kind of stuckness is captured and where you can maybe see some progress along the way. But again, we don't provide very big funding, so it's not in our way of working, and it's not viable in any case to come in with a big log frame and very time-consuming demands in terms of M&E. And then at the end, we go back to this change objective, what has changed, what's positive, negative, expected, unexpected, and then we always try to look what has become possible in terms of your work on the ground and in terms of impact that wouldn't have been possible without the OD. And we get a few stories, but it's difficult to have it be very sort of rigorous and data strong. Yeah.
I would say that it depends on why you decide to do OD, and as you understood at Mava, we are a little bit focused on our closing in 2022, and that's the reason why we decided to have very simple and basic indicators, because our main concern is the level of financial dependency of our partners, and we want to make them strong enough in 2022 with a low level of dependency from Mava funding to let them in a pretty good situation when they will leave or they will lose the funding from Mava. So the level of dependency is basic, very basic, but sufficient for us, I would say, indicator of OD impact. And we also have the turnover of the teams, the staff within the organizations, the level of unrestricted funding, and the feeling we have concerning their the quality of their management and governance.
Thank you. I think we have one more question here.
Thank you, Nicolas Kraus, Charles Leopold Mava Foundation in Lausanne. I wanted to come back to the relationship between OD and core funding.
Yes, please.
That you mentioned a little bit earlier. I was wondering if one of the findings or the outcome of the report, and maybe that's also a question for you, Claudia, since you supervised it. Does funding OD, is it the first step towards bringing core support to the organization? Because I think that most of the foundations, they don't provide this kind of unrestricted long-term funding because they are afraid that the organizations won't be able to handle it, or to manage this kind of funding. So strategically speaking, if we think that core support is the only way to promote or to bring about systemic change that we need. So I was wondering if OD could be the entry point in for such an approach.
I would say that maybe if it can be for those, if there's a very big concern about creating dependency, OD can be an intermediary or a different entry point exactly. That's because you're funding a very specific process of change that will make the organization more effective, more better managed, better governed, but you're not creating that financial dependency. So, yeah.
If I may perhaps give an insight from Laudes Foundation, even though Fabio cannot be here, but Fabio Almeida from Laudes explains very clearly that actually Laudes is using OD as an entry point for partners that they believe are promising, that they are not yet even supporting programmatically, and they think these would be the right partners, but they're not ready yet for like the big programmatic money. So they actually start with an OD assessment, with an OD program, with the idea to later on come up with programmatic funds and core funding as well to complement. So what we also saw in discussing and writing the paper was that OD, core funding, and programmatic money can be sequenced in different manners, but always with a certain purpose.
Yeah. For us, OD is not necessarily linked to the core support funding. So the core support funding is always for those partners who are well aligned. Their strategy is well aligned with the foundation, the program strategy of the foundation. So they, if this alignment is good, these partners will get core support with or without OD on top of that, let's say. Generally, in the very beginning, our OD doesn't come in as an entry point. I think Simon was talking about building trust, And the type of discussions that we need to have with organizations when we engage in organizational development are sometimes quite sensitive. And if it's a start of a relationship, you don't have that trust to have that open discussion and to see, okay, what exactly is the challenge? How can we support? So generally, we will start with a grant. It can be a pilot grant or, a small trial grant, and then we would go into giving a longer-term support, a core support, and sometimes even an OD support if that's necessary. Laudes, I think, is a very special case where they actually use that as an entry point, as a way to knowing the organization.
But there are really many ways to do it. If I also take this opportunity to bring an example from Mercator Switzerland Foundation, and I think in some regions you do that as well, Adriana, with Oak. They say, well, actually, this organization, we would like to provide organizational development to them, but they're not ready to come up with the right proposal because they have not yet identified entirely what they need. So in order to be ready for an OD support, they give a pre-grant for a health check in advance that is already supported by the foundation, Mercator, that then to make them basically ready to then go for a bigger OD program. So it can really be assembled like Legos in different ways. It just needs to, obviously to be coherent in the end. There are many, many ways to do so. Any additional question, remark? There were a few hands at the beginning raising when I asked who is doing or funding organizational development. Is there anybody who would like to share what they're doing or how? Because the risk is that I come up with my long list of questions. So, if not, I'm happy to jump in a little bit deeper, maybe in highlights and challenges. And I have one question for you, Carole, because you're working in very different geographies. What are some of the challenges you see by working in very different local environments, and how do you adapt?
Yeah, so it's you. I mean, one of our big principle is context responsiveness and context sensitivity. So obviously, being very adapted to the needs and the culture of the organization is key to us. We always try to work with local consultants, but we've learned that it's also really adapting our own expectations or ways of working. For instance, a participatory workshop, I mean, already here may not be a fully safe space, but in other cultures you will not speak about what's going wrong or contradict your hierarchy in an open workshop, so you can push a little bit the envelope because you're trying to encourage a more open and sort of participatory organizational culture, but you cannot go against it. You can't create. You can create backlash. So we work in West Africa. We work in Central Asia, and then you're dealing with very different types of potential resistance or biases, and even within the organization, for instance, in Central Asia, it's extremely clear that you have also the new and the old generation. You have often the leadership that is very much programmed still in a sort of by a Soviet educational system, and then you have a younger group of people who want to do different things differently, and you have to be able to facilitate a greater intergenerational and internal dialogue on, okay, what kind of organizational culture without pushing too much for your own way of doing things. And again, we now, and that's quite new for us, we now have presence on the ground so that organizations are supported locally by local colleagues and local consultants.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and
Simon?
Just to confirm, because we have worked all together, I mean Mava and PeaceNexus, to identify and to find good consultants, local consultants in West Africa. and it worked very well. I mean, and I just wanted to advise, it is worth to spend time to identify the very good consultant, local consultant. A good consultant could really make a difference on OD, and a bad consultant could be a nightmare. Just to say, it's not easy to fire someone you have engaged in a partnership with the partners, etc., etc. So it's a very critical first step to find the good people to work with you on OD, with you and the partner, of course. And it's also very important to engage the partners to find the good consultants. This is not something we have to do by ourselves, also only. I mean, it's important to have the partners involved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Maybe to add on this, I mean, this event we did together was really to meet consultants, because they can look great on CV, but end up being very different in the approach as they actually implement it. We actually stay very involved. We are hands-on in doing the needs analysis and the participatory sort of visioning and road mapping with the partner, but we remain still strongly involved with helping in a way the partner manage the consultant, because you do end up with sometimes consultants who are imposing their own agenda or just not delivering a good quality. And often the majority of our partners are local organization, and even, I mean, managing change is in itself a difficult process. Managing a consultant may also be new to them and needs to be constantly re-evaluated, adjusted. And so we've found that this triangular relationship can be very helpful. We can play good cop, bad cop. We can bring in some elements into the conversations that may be missing. Sometimes a consultant also, there's a limit to how much they can challenge the partner, because at the end of the day, they're contracted by the partner. We give the funding to the partner, not we, most of the time. And so we can then come in and remind the partner, this is what you committed to, and let's really leverage this to its maximum impact. So we find that that gives us also added impact.
Thank you. So, oh yes, we have one more question from Beate, and then I would ask Thierry to join, but let's take the question from Beate.
Just popped up in my mind, maybe a question to Simon from Mava. Do you plan, because you are closing in 2022, are you planning to give this kind of expertise, like the intermediaries, you work together very successfully, to give this kind of information free to the sector? I mean, I don't know, publish a list of intermediaries? Or, I mean, have you thought about that?
I don't want to speak on the behalf of Mava and for all the organization, of course, but what we plan is to work a lot on learning and to take stock of all the great experience we have since we started in 25 years ago, and to of course, yes, trying to share, to capture and to share with our peers the lesson learned of this great experience. We have, I don't know, maybe Thierry will complete it, but we don't have any clear scenario on what could be done afterwards with intermediaries or other organizations. We don't know exactly, but the idea is, for the moment, to share lesson learned, capitalization, learning, and to support the partners also to invest on learnings, to take advantage, to still have funding from Mava, to build their own knowledge and to share their knowledge and learnings concerning their own specificity and fields.
And if I may, Beate, and obviously the other participants of the discussion, Oak Foundation, together with Laudes Foundations and the third one, you have a consultant rosters. They even have a website, right, where you post the good, a white list of, I think, consultants, but please, it's better if you explain it, Adriana, than if I...
Yeah, we had this desire to share, and we have helped set up a website called the Nonprofit Builder, and this is basically a resource, a database of consulting resources in the countries where we are working, and we have seen this. We have found this challenge of finding the right intermediaries, consultants. I imagine that's the. And we also joined forces with Packard, so it's a place where consultants and organizations who provide this kind of support are invited to put their data there. It's searchable. And we have an external, person who actually manages this for us. Yeah, so, exactly. Because of the GDPR legislation, we could not keep this data, all this data, and all these CVs, and in our own files. It was too much work for us to curate that. So we found this solution which actually works for us. So we have their consultants, we have resources. Learning materials for foundations, but also for grantees as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the moment is right. Thierry, if you can join us, as I said. Thierry Renaud from Mava, and he was part of the group. And the reason why, welcome in this circle.
Merci.
The reason why I suggest that you join Thierry was because the last round of conversations I would like to do around the learning community, a bit why did the 5 foundations, originally there were less 4, and then Mercator joined earlier this year. What does it bring? Where would you like to bring this group going forward, etc.? So, please.
Yes, so when I think it first started by personal connections and a desire to start discuss common challenges, and we had great fun, and we wanted to meet again and then again, and we had some good discussion on content. So I think it started by that, and we took. I mean, personally, there was some kind of therapy in there. Just talking about the same challenges with people who face the same challenges, both internally in your daily work, which is very useful and provides a lot of energy. But then also we entered into the discussion of the real content and all the challenges, and you have some in the paper, and I think there are still a lot of challenges to discuss. So where we can bring this forward, the group, we see it as want to continue to meet and to discuss things. There are key challenges, key nuts that we still need to crack. We've mentioned impact measurement, some other how do you organize within the foundation to do organizational development, and this tension between program funding or core funding and organizational development funding, and how do you make these two work. So there are several things that we still need to crack amongst ourselves and recognizing our difference. So I think that's the first very useful thing we can do. But also, Carole mentioned it. I mean, we all believe that, and it's written here, it's a very smart investment to do organizational development. It reinforces your partners, and then in ricochet, it also magnifies your impact. So it's a very useful tool in the toolbox of foundations, and we want to make sure that everybody is aware of that and kind of encourage foundations to engage in that journey, and also to not only put a spotlight, but the message is not so complicated to do organizational development. So it's not, big word, ooh, that's huge, we don't know how to do that, we're just funding projects. There are some very simple steps that can be done.
So what could a foundation do who is currently funding projects but would be keen on starting some OD Is it like fully fledged straight away? Are there ways to start like small and test?
So I think that was one of the messages of the paper as well, was to say there are many different ways and you don't need to start full on. But there also, I think all of us have had also just kind of bilateral presentations for foundations who have, at the very beginning of this journey, we've shared among ourselves as having a kind of already a few years of practice. But for those that are at the very early days, there are also ways for us to sort of share in groups or bilaterally or give presentations. There's also a group I'm involved in where they wanted to see our contracts, our internal forms, and once you've
so it can be very hands-on.
It can be it can be about the general theory of change and general dilemmas, but also sort of look at the concrete nuts and bolts. Okay, how does a contract look like when you do OD versus core versus programmatic? So many ways.
I can add maybe that if very often foundations already do organizational development, even if they do not really do it explicitly. But when you do grants, it's likely that you fund at some point some capacity building or some process within the organization. And so that means that you are already discussing some of the key issues of organizational development with your partners. And I think that if you go through your portfolio of projects that you fund, you can realize that you're actually already having some of this discussion with your partner. And I think that's the best way to just go through that door and do more.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional questions from the floor? If not, I would suggest that we go into a final statement in terms of closure of this session. If each one of you could just make one statement that why is OD worth for you, or where you want to go with it in future. I give two options, and if you want to say something else, you're welcome as well. But just like a final statement to like round up your contribution, please.
I think for me, it's encouraging to see more and more foundations actually taking this step and investing in organizational development and capacity building. So clearly there is like Simon said, especially now with a crisis, with a lockdown, that people realize that organizational resilience and sustainability is quite important. So I think there is, hope for the future that a lot more foundations will actually invest in this area, because you can't have good programs without having good institutions to deliver those. So they are at the basis of the civil society and the social change that all the foundations are striving to do. So I'm hopeful. I end up on a positive and hopeful note.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to round up?
No, it's the same. I mean, we have to build on or to take stock of the COVID situation to showcase that resilience is not, it's not an issue. You have to invest on resilience on your partners. So, yeah, of course.
Thank you.
And maybe also just to build on what Thierry says, in some ways, I think we all probably, or many foundations do it already to some extent. But there's real value in really being quite structured and intentional, that you don't just kind of respond and try to help with problems as they come along, but that you really create a space for a full change process. And the OD process is there to strengthen the organization, but it's also educational, because the leadership learns being accompanied through the different steps of change, learns how to lead, grows. You see people grow as managers, as ED, as board members through that process. So there are multiple potential benefits, and yeah, I mean, again, all of us are happy to share more.
Thank you. Thierry?
Yeah, so maybe just 2 points. First, well, thank you, Claudia, for facilitating everything, and thanks to you, we have now a paper that you have in your hands, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
And the second point is a call a call to be challenged and to be inspired, because you have now a paper in your hands. It's a living document. So if you are already doing organizational development, please tell us, contribute to it, help us crack the nuts that we still have. If you want to do some organizational development, also come to us, and want to keep this lively and evolving over time.
Thank you.